Okay, so we are on Gimel of Tishrei, but we have to do Beis and Gimel because we didn't do the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And I would like to dedicate this shir to the Aliyas HaNeshama of Yosef Yitzhak, Rab Kalmanson, Yosef Yitzhak Kalmanson, who was a Rav, Mashpia, Agoin, who passed away on the first day of Rosh Hashanah in Connecticut, in New Haven. The Neshama shall have an Aliyah. Hayom Yom. Gimel Tishrei. Gimel Tishrei begins with a halacha that applies to when Shabbos happens, every festival ending on Friday, but this is not this year. And then there's certain halachas here. And we're going to jump into the teaching here, which applies to this particular day and every Gimel Tishrei. The Tzemach Tzedek had Yehidus with the Alter Rebbe on Monday of Parshas Kitzetzei, which was in Elul 1804, 6 Elul 1804. The Rebbe told him that on Shabbos, same Parsha, different Parsha, Parsha Kitzava, Tzava 5528, which was 1768, that the Rebbe, the Maggid of Mezrich, said a Torah beginning, V'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha. You should return to Hashem, your God. Simple words, right? But he explained, what does it mean, Shuvah? V'shavta, you should return. He explained that the void of Shuvah must attain a level at which Havaya Elokecha. It says, V'shavta ad Havaya Elokecha. We've learned that Havaya, the Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, is a deeper level of godliness than Elokim, and so you have to return to the deeper level of godliness. Return to Havaya, which he says in English, translating the Hebrew and Yiddish, the transcendent divinity. One has to return to the transcendent divinity, beyond worlds, which will relate to our Tanya that we're coming up to now. Until such point that which was beyond worlds becomes invested and sensed and felt and expressed in you within worlds. That which beyond worlds becomes invested in Elokim. Elokim being numerically equivalent to Hateva. In other words, as we've said many times in Tanya, to bring to the surface the hidden godliness which is within us. Elokim refers to God as he acts in nature, all of nature, including all the worlds. And Elokim is the inner force which is embodied in worlds. So embodied in us is the Nefesh Elokis. The Nefesh Elokis can be covered over, and we work with the Shem Elokim, that Shem which has to do with nature. But the avoida is to return and see the Havaya, the level above that, the level of godliness deeper than that within each and every one of us. So we find this, Elokim is equivalent to Hateva. As I said, it's our nature, that which we naturally go about doing. And we find, in the beginning, Elokim created the heavens and the earth. That's the externality of godliness. And I'm using these words pointedly because they're going to relate to the Tanya that we're learning. The internality and the externality of God. The Panemius and the Chitzonius. Havaya, the Panemius, Elokim, the Chitzonius. And it's with this Chitzonius, his externality. Remember, the metaphor of creation is just speech. And behind speech is thought. And behind thought, we go back into deeper levels of consciousness. But it was only Elokim with which he created the heavens and the earth. So this is what the Alter Rebbe, the Mezrich Maggid said. So after he said this, all the holy society, which were the disciples of the Maggid, were profoundly stirred by the teaching. It excited them. The Tzaddik Rabbi Shulam Zusia of Annapolis said that he could not attain the heights of such a tshuva, that the panemius of Hashem should actually be felt in one's Elokim, in one's nature, So he would therefore break down tshuva to its components. For each letter of the word tshuva is the initial of a verse. And he's going to give us the overview, and then in the next few days we're going to take each one of them separately. So the overview, teshuva, the tough, tamim, it's a pasuk, be sincere with the eternal your God. The shin, shifti, I have set God before me always. V'ahavta, the vav, love your fellow as yourself. V'ahavta, bechol, in all your ways you should know him, the beis. And then hasniya, walk discreetly with your God. So each one of these we'll explain starting tomorrow. When my father told me this, he concluded, the word Shuva comprises 5 Hebrew letters, each letter a path. Each letter is a path and a method in the avodah of Shuva. He explained each method at length. Each moves from a potential state to actuality through the avodah of davening. So this we're going to explore more tomorrow, each of these letters, and how to bring that from potential to actuality through davening. And this idea, globally, potential to actual is continuing the subject that we started before Rosh Hashanah. And so we're starting with page, the second of Tishrei, yesterday, which we didn't do, on page 342, Lessons in Tanya, volume 4, and Likutei Moharan, yes, Beis Tishrei, the bottom of page, near the bottom of page, Kuf Chav, yes, counting up from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7 lines up from the bottom. Okay, just a quick reminder. In the Geras HaKodesh here, we're explaining rather abstractly something which is fairly abstract. Remember, we spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu versus the Chachamim of the Kabbalah. They had understanding in the abstract levels of God. Abstract meaning, as you say, something is abstracted from, it's removed from, and that's the word Kodesh. Although Hashem is never actually removed, there are layers of godliness that are unfolded, and there are deeper layers which are hidden, and those hidden layers we call abstract or hidden levels. And the Kabbalists had a hasaga, they had an understanding in them. But Moshe Rabbeinu, he had a vision. He could see into these deeper levels. And now we're going to discuss and give some specific architecture, so to speak, to these deeper levels of Hashem and how they roll out. All of which is meant to give us a more intense appreciation and relationship with Hashem. But it's very abstract, so let's go. Vehine. V'chines chachmas elokus. The levels which we call the wisdom, the wise, and we're saying chachmas elokus there, we established that each sphere, including chachma, has 3 levels. The external, which relates to the downward, the next level below it, like chachma relates to bina, the middle, and then the upper, which relates in the case of chachma, to the ayin. So v'chinas chachmas elokus, the wisdom of godliness, Baruch Hu, hamlubeshes b'tariag mitzvas HaTorah, which is included in the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. So as the Chachma itself, and even the essence of Chachma itself, and even the essence beyond Chachma itself, is invested in the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. So that level, called M'Shem Achorayim de Chachma, that proximate source of the lower levels, Chachma as it relates to the lower levels, is called the Achorayim, or the backside, or the Chatzonius, the externality of the sphere of Chachma. Ki kol Achorayim shebespheros, because all the backsides, so to speak, of the spheros, of the 10 spheres, hein medreges hataktoinus, they're the lower levels, b'mayla, in the level of the spheres. These are the lower levels of the spheres, which are invested in the next lower layer below it. The lower levels, which are able to be to descend and to flow into the level below it, and ultimately to be enclosed in the creation and all of the things which are in creation, and to enliven it. So the lower levels of the spheros, and we're speaking particularly of Chokhmah, the acharayim, the externality, or the backside, comes down into Bina, and then it invests itself in the midos, which are the proximate sources of action. The way you feel is how you move. Haponim, that's called the acharayim. Now, what about the panemius, the inner dimension? Bechinas haponim, which is the face, literally the panemius. Hu hasphira atzmo. That's the sphera itself. Amiyuchedes be'atzilus, as it's united in the world of Atzilus, which is the expression of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, b'tachlis hayichud. So in Atzilus, there's an expression that says, the Zohar says, in Atzilus, he and his spheros are one. So Atzilus has a sense of the inner dimension, but Atzilus is also a world, and then its relation to Bria is going to be through the externality, the lower level of the spheros. Going Derek Marshall, we take specifically the sphere of Chokhmah. The sphere of Chokhmah, the first of the 10 spheres, is united, b'matzila, is united with her emanator, which is the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Flipping the page to 256. B'tachlis hayichud, with a complete unity. I should let you know, we're going to do two days today. This is going to go fast. There's a lot of material to cover. Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because God Himself, the Chachmasai, and His wisdom are echad, are one. Now that's always the fact. God and His wisdom, God and His midos, God and everything. There is nothing besides Him. But as you come down in worlds, there appears to be more of a separation or a concealment. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One and His Chokhmah, are one, as we wrote above. And that which shines down and spreads out from God's blessed Chokhmah, Lamata, down here below, B'tachtoinim, in the lower worlds, Shehen Bali Gavul, which the more down you go, the more tzimtzum, the more limitation, and more definition and tachlis, umislabish, and more enclothement, that's called achurayim. That's called the backside. So you have panim, face to face. The mashal is also like it's used in Hasidus to describe the cherubim on the ark, the top of the ark. When the Yidden did the will of Hashem, they turned face to face, panim b'panim. And when the Yidden were not doing God's will, they turned back to back. So panim is the inner dimension, back is the outer dimension, which is a subject more to tzimtzum, backside. It's also called, in the terminology of Kabbalah, the level of Asiya, which is the lowest level of Atzilus. In other words, there's Atzilus of Atzilus, the Panimis of Chokhmah of Atzilus, which has an open connection and feels the infinity of Hashem. And then there's the world of Atzilus, which is the Asiya, the actual doing of the world of Atzilus. Pirish, which means, by way of an example, let's look at ourselves down here below, a human being. The person, we all have 5 levels. Zula matam zu, one level to the other. So this is a metaphor which helps us, which is meant to help us understand what we just talked about, the levels of godliness. So we have 5 levels, one below the other. Shehen b'chinas hasechel, right, which is intellect. That's the top level, mind. V'hamidos, feeling. That's the next. And then we have machshava dibra maja, thought, speech, and deed. So we have 5 levels. Intellect, midos, thought, speech, and action. And deed is the lowest of all those 5. The life, because the life force which flows from the neshama, from the soul, umalubish b'koyach hamasa, and which is enclosed in the power of deed, uka'ayin lagabe achayas hamispashet memenu, is like nothing, zero, very little, compared to the life force, which is malubish b'chinas hadibur. Right? Speech is above deed, so speech has more, is closer to the essence of the soul. Jehu, which speech now, it is closer, but that it's not as close as the next higher level, in relation to the actual life force which flows from the soul, which is enclosed in thought, and enclosed in midos and seichel. So we understand we have levels of our soul. We're doing is an expression of something deeper. That's a simple way of understanding it. Doing is an expression of something deeper, and we articulated 5 levels going back to seichel. So similarly, al derech zem mamish hu v'chinas chachmasa yisborach. So we are made in God's image. So similarly, God gave us the gift of being able to grasp something of Him by understanding something of ourselves. So as we've just explained something of ourselves, so it is with God. Hachmasa yisborach, His wisdom may be blessed. Masha yochol lehispashet mimenu, which is able to flow from Him. Lehashpia uleslabish v'datoinim, to flow and to be enclosed in the lower worlds. Kulam hem ka'ayin, that's like nothing. That which flows from Him and becomes worlds. As we said, worlds are subject to olam miloshin helam, concealment. There's a deeper place of revelation in the infinite one Himself. The kula kamei kolei, from which perspective, from the perspective of the upper level of God, everything that He does is considered like nothing, trivial. And this flow, which flows from the infinite to the finite, and all the gradations of lower levels, Atzilas, Bri, Yitzir, etc., that flow to all the creations, Kulim Shehem Baligvul, they're all limited. The Tachlis, they have ends, they have definitions. This is Bria, it's not Yitzira, right? This is a rock, it's not something else. So everything is bounded. And all of this boundedness, this perception of boundedness, because it's all alakus, right? But this perception of boundedness as you go lower and lower and lower, next Shevasurida, that's considered a descent, v'tzimtzum, and a contraction, kaviyachol, as if you can say such a thing. In other words, understand that descent and contraction and all these words we use are just metaphors for God Himself. And these are lower levels, Lagabe Hamatzil, in relation to the Emanator Himself, which is Ein Sof, which is infinite. And we call Him the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Al derech mashal, by way of example, of a metaphor. Just like in a person, the spiritual and godly force that's in the neshama becomes enclosed first and contracts itself to be enclosed in intellect of a person, or Adam, hamaskil, who's understanding something, hamasumsum be'eza asiya, and this gradually gets, I'm thinking about something, I imagine how I'm going to do it, I have a feeling for wanting to do it, and then I do it. And it becomes enclosed in some kind of doing, some physical deed or some physical object. If you're speaking about God creating something, in which it becomes physical, behumrius, and substantial, mamish. Now, back a little bit to what we've been speaking about before Rosh Hashanah. Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav Shalom, shehisig ad acharayim de chachma. He was able to grasp, right, he had an understanding of the so-called backside of Chachma. So remember, we're using backside as it's Chachma, but it's not the essence of Chachma, it's the appearance of Chachma, and as it appears, there's a certain hiddenness. In order for infinity to have some relation to finitude, there has to be infinity, the infinite aspect of it has to be a bit hidden. So it's called the backside of Chachma. Zacha, that's what he merited to see, to Masig, Torah, and that is what's given into the Torah. The Torah is called Chochmas Hashem, and it contains the infinite, Anoichi, His very self, but it's a vehicle, it's a garment, it's an expression of the Torah. Shehi Nevles Chochma Shelamayla, which is, and we're saying it in a belittling way, this Torah is just a vestige or like a piece of dried fruit on a branch relative to the juicy and lively and all-encompassing energy which is beyond being expressed in any particular thing, even in the Torah. So the Torah is a condensation of God's internal and deepest wisdom. Pirush. When we say it's just a noivlis chokhmah, a vestige of chokhmah, means shenoivel memenu, there's something that flows down, and as it flows down, it becomes more condensed, more physicalized, right? I mean, the Torah is not physical, but more this source of mindedness becomes more and more embodied mindedness in the Torah, and it flows down in that. And it comes down and descends. And this wisdom of Hashem, because it comes enclosed in the Torah, b'Torah Gashmis, in the physical Torah Shalonu that we have. Which its root and its whole, what it's really about, is what is it about? What's the point of this? What's the point of God contracting himself and giving us these backside or the noivlos, the vestige of his chokmah in the Torah, in order that we should be able to fulfill ha-mitzvahs, to fulfill the mitzvahs, loisa seviyase, the negative and the positive, the poil, in actuality, and in physical deeds. Kemaimer, as the saying goes, hayayim la'asoisam. Today is the day to do, and not to receive reward. Today is the day to do. And doing is with a physical body. But in the physical body, as he's about to tell us in a very long, interesting mashal about letters have physicality, but they also have something else behind them, which is the innermost aspect of the letters. And so our deeds are not just plain deeds. Our deeds are the hands and feet of God. We don't see God because God himself is enclosed in it, contracted in it, but we are expressing with our hands and feet God's will. To do them. And the sages said in the Gemara and Kedushin, great is learning. Why? Because it brings to deed. So you could say, great is God's Chokhmah because he has brought it, contracted it into deeds so that we can do it and connect with him through our deeds. And the Chachamim go on and say, one who learns and doesn't do, very powerful expression. One who learns and doesn't do, it's better that his afterbirth had been turned on his face, meaning that he should never have been born. Because the whole purpose of being born is to do God's will. He says every person has to, this galgal, by the way, to come into incarnation after incarnation, until one does all 613 mitzvahs, as is known from the Arizal. And that is the Tanya of second day of Rosh Hashanah. Pause. Just pause. Any questions? Anything you want to say? Okay. So that's the metaphor. Now he's going to give us an actual substantial metaphor with letters. Letters, remember we spoke a little about letters of speech in the Torah, the way they're spoken versus the way they're written. We use an example that Hashem is to him, and it could be not, Hashem is not, or Hashem is to him. It depends which way you read it. It's written with an aleph, loi, and it has the meaning of a vav, which is to him. So there are various levels there's the actual physical, you look at it, letter, and there are deeper letters of the letters. That's the metaphor he's going to give us in this little piece to give us a broader, deeper understanding of this idea of layer upon layer of reality and the inner ones being hidden. Okay, we're going to look at letters. Letters haniglas lanu. The letters that are written in the Torah, or wherever there is written, they're revealed, we see them. And b'masa dibra mashava. Letters exist indeed. That's the way we look at them and we see them. Dibur, and then there's the way we speak about them, and then there's the way they exist in our thought. So again, the same thing, but there's the externality of the thing. That's the lower level of thing, the deed. There's the middle, which is the way it's spoken, and then there's the way it's thought, internal. Maisa, the Maisa of the mitzvah, the deed of the letter, the deed of the letter. In Kemunas Oisis is the form of the letter on the page. Shebiksav as is written. Biksav Ashura Shebiksav Torah, in the Assyrian form of the letters, which are the shape of the letters in the written Torah. The Oisis Adibar, and the letters of speech, Nechaches Behevel. That's the way they're expressed, or literally engraved, in the voice, in the breath and the voice. Which the voice and the voicing of the breath through letters is in 22 different ways. Different 22 different ways of forming the breath through the articulative powers of the mouth. Shehu hiboris umevata. That's the speech of the letter, the way you said it, of the kof boith oisius b'kol lashon, in any lashon, any letter. Every human being is constituted this way, that the breath comes out of the mouth, and there are 22 articulative, 5 articulative powers of the mouth, and that's how every and all languages can be expressed, because all human beings are built like that. There's no difference between the holy tongue, Lashon HaKodesh, and other tongues, other languages, when it comes to how they are uttered, how the letters are uttered. What is different is the shape of the letters. But the utterance, there are only, as we said, that many possibilities for uttering letters. Then that's the second level, the levels of as they are in utterancing, speeching. And then you have letters of thought. And Gamken b'chol lashon also exists in every language. The person thinks about the letters that he's going to say of the kof, and these are 22 alone. If you imagine the letter in your thought, I'm just going to do a simple exercise now. Take an aleph, imagine it in your brain. You're imagining it in the shape of an aleph, and then you're bringing it to speech. You say aleph, and then you can write it. So we have thought, speech, and action as it pertains to letters. So there are 3 kinds of categories in letters. And again, this is a mashal to understand the 3 levels that we talked about in all the spheres: the inner level, the intermediate level, and the lower level. The panemius, the emso, the middle, and the chitzonius, the external. And everything is built like this. When you look in a Sefer Torah, and you look at the shape of the letters, and we look at them, that clicks something in your brain, that there's a reflection of that going on in your brain and in your thought. And this letter on the page is called the doing, the externality, the doing of the letter. Likewise, when you hear letters of speech, you hear them in your ear and they resonate, and he says, leave a trace in your thought, and you begin to think about them. When you hear the letter and it starts to resonate in your thought, this is called speech of the thought. He's doing worlds. The first one was Asiya, the actual letter on the page, and that's the world of Asiya. And then the next level up from world is Yetzira, the form, the imagination as it hits your mind. And then there's letters of thought, which is going to correspond to Bria. Blihira oisias hadira, without any thinking of them, just the way they exist in thought, letters in thought. Bechinas bria, and that corresponds to the world of bria. So you say, generally, Atzilus is a world; it's the fourth world, but Atzilus has a different characteristic than all the other worlds. It's one with God. It has a sense of the oneness of God. When we speak about creation, the word for create is bria. Bereshit bora elakim, bria. So that starts through the three, bria, yitzira, and asiya. So what he's done here is taken the externality is asiya, in the middle of it is yitzira, and the root of it is bria. Now the actual words of speech, just like speech recedes from thought, so the actual words on the paper, you had to think about them, and you drew them. That means something was going on in your thought. He said parenthetically, sometimes a person speaks, and he's thinking about something else, sort of absent-mindedly, I guess you could call that. I'm speaking something, but I'm thinking something else. My mind isn't there. So that happens. He says, this is a parenthesis. Nevertheless, what you're speaking about, even though you may be speaking absent-mindedly, is something that you've already spoken. And it's been in your mind a number of times. That's why you're speaking about it now. And it remained there. And it leaves a trace there many times, from having said it many times. Now that's a parenthesis. Back to the root. Actual speaking, when you're thinking, right, and then as you're thinking a thought, and your thought is now going to come into letters. Before the letters come into speech, they're letters of mashava, then they come into speech. So we have the Bechinas Acharayim V'Chitzonius. That's the externality of the letters. When that happens, there's a combination of the higher level, the machshava of the letter, which gets manifest in the lower level, which is a speech. The thought becomes the brain, so to speak, of what you speak. And I said that whole piece is a muscle to give an example of these three layers of Maisa Dibur, the letter on the paper, the thought of it, and then the speech of it, and then the thought of it. And everything operates on this level. The highest level being the Penimius, then the Emtsoi, the middle level, and then the Chitzonius. The middle level is what connects the upper with the lower. And that is a model for Elokus. So I guess one takeaway we have to take that since the letter on the page owes its entirety of existence to the fact that it existed previously in a more sublime state, so we have to know that all the mitzvahs maisius that we do and will do today and the next day are all containing within them not only the thought, but the very essence of Hashem. That's today's Tanya. A lot of stuff, huh? All right, any questions, comments? See you tomorrow in your session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.